Before the first hero lifted a blade, before the first prayer rose, there was only the dark, and the shapes that moved inside it, a coil beneath the sea, vast enough to swallow the world and bite its own tail. A thing with a woman's face and a lion's hunger crouched on the road, whispering riddles. A single stare that turned living men to cold gray stone. A wolf so great the gods themselves bound it in chains, and then stood back and were afraid. These are the monsters of the ancient world, the beasts that every civilization dreamed, feared, and tried to kill. They were never only stories. They were chaos given teeth, the thing that stood between mankind and the edge of the map. By the end of this, you will know every great beast, where it came from, what it guarded, and how it finally died. So take a breath and step past the firelight into the places the old maps marked only with a warning. We begin where every terror begins, not on solid ground, but in the endless coils of the serpent. Almost every people on earth told the same first story, that before the world was ordered, chaos was a dragon, and it had to be killed. In Mesopotamia she was Tiamat, the salt sea itself, the primordial mother, her body, the raw unmade stuff of everything. When the young gods rose against her, she bore an army of monsters and set the horned dragon Muchu-Wu at their head. The storm god Marduk met her with the winds, loosed one arrow through her heart, and split her body into the sky above and the earth below. Far to the west, Egypt feared Apep, a serpent of pure chaos coiled in the darkness of the underworld. Each night he rose against the sun god Ra's boat to swallow the light, and each dawn he was driven back, never slain, only defeated. Older still was Anzu, the lion-headed stormbird who stole the Tablet of Destinies, until the warrior Ninurta struck him down and won it back. In Greece, the chaos-serpent had a name that still means storm, Typhon, tallest of all monsters, 100 dragon heads rising to the stars. He alone made Zeus flee, until the king of the gods buried him beneath Mount Etna, whose fire is his fury still. Typhon's brood filled the world. Python, the great serpent coiled at the earth's navel at Delphi, fell to Apollo's arrows. Ladon, the 100-headed dragon, wound sleepless around the tree of golden apples, until Heracles came for the fruit it guarded. And in the swamp of Lerna waited the Hydra, whose horror was simple. Cut off one head, and 2 grew back in its place. Heracles learned the trick with fire, his nephew searing each stump shut, and buried the last immortal head beneath a stone. In the cold north lay the greatest serpent of all, circling the whole of the world in the deep ocean, Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent. It was fated to meet the thunder god Thor at the end of days, and there they would kill each other, god and dragon together. Beneath the world tree itself gnawed Nihagr, the dragon at the roots, chewing the dead and waiting for all creation to rot. The Slavs told of the Zemi, a fire-breathing dragon of 3 heads or more, burning villages and stealing maidens, slain by hero after hero. And in Japan came Yamata no Orochi, a serpent of 8 heads and 8 tails, sprawling across 8 valleys, devouring young women one by one. The storm god Susanoo set out 8 vats of rice wine. The beast drank and slept, and in its tail he found a sword, the sacred Kusanagi. And in the scriptures of Israel swam Leviathan, the sea dragon no hook could hold and no spear could pierce. No hero was ever sent against it. Leviathan belonged to God alone, a reminder that some chaos only the divine can tame. The serpent was the world's oldest fear. But the ancients dreamed a stranger horror too, the beast stitched together from many. Where the serpent was chaos, the hybrid was wrongness, nature broken apart and refused into a creature that should not be. The Chimera was that nightmare made flesh, a lion in front, a goat rising from its spine, a serpent for a tail, and fire in its throat. It ravaged Lycia until the hero Bellerophon, mounted on the winged horse Pegasus, struck from the sky where its flames could not reach. Pegasus itself was born of monstrous blood, sprung from the severed neck of Medusa, beauty and terror twinned from a single wound. Then there was the Sphinx, but she wore two faces across two lands. In Egypt, the Sphinx was a guardian, a lion-bodied king carved vast in stone, watching the desert with a calm and royal face. In Greece, she was a predator, a woman's head, a lion's body, an eagle's wings, strangling every traveler who failed her riddle. Only Oedipus answered her, "What walks on 4 legs, then 2, then 3, man?" And in her fury she threw herself from the rock. From Persia prowled the manticore, a red lion with a man's face, 3 rows of teeth, and a tail that fired venomous spines. The griffin joined the eagle to the lion, king of birds and king of beasts in one body, guarding hordes of gold in far mountains. On the island of Crete, in a labyrinth built to hide him, waited the Minotaur, a bull's head upon a man's body. Each year, young tributes were fed into the maze, until Theseus followed a single thread into the dark and did not come back alone. The centaurs galloped the wild hills, men to the waist, horse below, most of them drunk and violent, a rare few of them wise. The Harpies came on beating wings, women fused to birds of prey, snatching food and souls, filthy and swift as a storm wind. And the Sirens sang from their rocks, not the mermaids of later tales, but bird women whose voices lured whole crews onto the stones. Odysseus alone heard their song and lived. Lashed to his own mast, his men's ears stopped with wax as they rowed grimly past. Egypt kept the most final hybrid of all. Ammit, part crocodile, part lion, part hippo, crouched beside the scales of the dead. If a heart weighed heavier than the feather of truth, Ammit devoured it, and that soul was simply unmade, forever. But of all the ways a monster could kill, one needed no teeth at all. It needed only to be seen. The Gorgons were 3 sisters with wings of gold, tusks like a boar, and living snakes writhing where their hair should be. 2 of them, Stheno and Euryale, were immortal. Only the 3rd of them could die. Her name was Medusa. To meet her gaze was to turn to stone, and her lair stood ringed with the gray statues of men who had looked too long. The hero Perseus never looked at all. He watched her reflection in a polished shield and struck at her in the mirror world. From her fallen body sprang the winged horse Pegasus, and even in death her severed head still kept its power to petrify. That same power lived in the Basilisk, the little king of serpents, said to kill with a glance and wither the very grass. Its cousin was the Cockatrice, hatched, they whispered, from a rooster's egg brooded by a serpent, half bird and half snake. Both could be undone by their own reflection, or by the simple crow of a rooster, small mercies against a lethal stare. The petrifying beasts turned strength to stone. But some monsters did not lurk in the world. They simply were the mountains, old and cruel. Before there were gods, the Greeks said, there were giants, and the first of the monstrous giants had a single burning eye. The Cyclopes were mountain-tall shepherds with one eye in the brow. The most famous, Polyphemus, trapped Odysseus and his men inside a cave. He ate the sailors 2 by 2 until Odysseus blinded that single eye with a burning stake and slipped free beneath the sheep. The Gigantes were something worse. Earth-born giants who piled mountains to storm heaven itself and had to be put down god by god. In the north, the giants were the Jötnar, older than the gods, raw forces of frost and fire, and the untamed world. From the body of the first of them, the giant Ymir, the gods carved all of creation, his flesh, the land, his blood, the sea. And at the end of days, the fire giant Surtur will ride from the south, his sword brighter than the sun, to burn the world clean. In the oldest epic ever written, the giant Humbaba guarded the Cedar Forest. His breath was fire, and his roar was a flood. The king Gilgamesh and his friend Enkidu cornered him. He begged for mercy. They took his head instead, and the gods never forgave it. Giants guarded the wild edges of the world, but the darkest beasts guarded a different border, the doorway into the land of the dead. Every underworld had its gate, and every gate had its monster, set there to keep the living out and the dead within. At the gates of the Greek underworld crouched Cerberus, a hound of 3 heads, a serpent for a tail, a mane of hissing snakes. For his final labor, Heracles went down and dragged the beast up into the daylight with his bare hands, then carried it back, unharmed. Above ground he had faced the Nemean Lion, whose golden hide no blade could cut, so he strangled it and wore its skin as armor. In the north the threshold beast was a wolf, Fenrir, son of a god who grew so vast the gods dared not let him roam. They tricked him into a ribbon forged from impossible things, the footfall of a cat, the roots of a mountain, and it held. But it was foretold that at Ragnarok, the end of all things, Fenrir would break his bonds and swallow Odin, the All-Father, whole. And where the sea met the stone stood the cruelest gate of all, a strait so narrow that death waited on both sides at once. On one cliff lurked Scylla, once a nymph, cursed into a thing of 6 long necks and 6 shrieking dog-headed maws. Beneath the other cliff churned Charybdis, a vast mouth in the sea that swallowed the ocean 3 times a day and spat it back. To sail the strait was to choose your ruin, pass close to Scylla and lose 6 men, or near Charybdis and lose everything at once. Odysseus chose the 6. He watched them lifted screaming from the deck, and he sailed on, because a captain must. Far in the frozen north, sailors feared a shape without a name, an island that was not an island, rising slowly beneath the keel. The Norse called it the kraken, a sea beast so vast it could be mistaken for land, its arms able to drag a whole ship under. It began as a whispered sailor's warning, and grew, century by century, into the great tentacled terror we picture today. Behind it stood 100 nameless sea serpents, the coiling shapes that filled the blank blue spaces of every ancient chart. The sea was the last true wilderness, and it swarmed with monsters. But the beasts of the world were far from finished. Turn east and the monsters change their masks, but never their meaning. On the ritual bronzes of ancient China glares the Tao Ti, a devouring mask of eyes and horns and jaws, the very face of gluttony. It had no body, only an endless hunger, and it was carved as a warning. This is what greed finally makes of you. In Japan, the roads were haunted by the Oni, hulking horned ogres with iron clubs and hides of angry red and blue, and by the kitsune, the fox spirit, who grew a new tail with every century and could wear the shape of a beautiful stranger. Deep in the Slavic forest waited Baba Yaga, in a hut that stood on giant chicken legs and spun to face the dark. She was neither holy monster nor holy witch. She might devour you, or she might, if you were brave and clever, help you. And in Hebrew tradition stood 3 primal beasts, one for each domain God had made, the whole of a wild creation given form. Leviathan for the sea, Behemoth for the land, mightiest of beasts, who grazes 1,000 mountains bare each day. And Z's for the sky, a bird so vast its wings blot out the sun, while its feet still rest upon the earth below. Held back until the end of time, they are chaos-leashed, proof that even the wildest powers answer to something greater than themselves. Now look back across all of it, every sea and forest and gate and grave, and the same shape appears again and again. The many-headed serpent, the stony stare, the guardian at the threshold, the hunger with no bottom. Different lands, the same dream, because every people faced the same darkness and gave it the same kind of teeth. The monster was never really the enemy. It was the boundary, the wall standing at the very edge of the known. And the hero was never really the point. He was the moment a people decided the dark could be faced and beaten. That is why the beasts had to be so terrible. A small monster makes a small courage. A world serpent makes a god. Every dragon killed was a coastline mapped. Every Gorgon beheaded was a fear outgrown. Every gatehound passed was a grief survived. The monsters are how the ancient world drew the line between order and chaos, and then dared itself to cross it. They are still with us. In every story where something vast and hungry rises, and someone small stands up to meet it. Because the oldest truth the monsters teach is also the simplest, the dark is real. And still, again and again, we walk into it. These were the monsters of the ancient world. Now you know where they came from, what they guarded, and how they died. Sleep well.